Something in your world did not just change today. It crossed a threshold, and the reason it feels so unsettling is because your mind is arriving late to something your body already recognized. You felt it before you could label it, before you could organize it into logic. There was a subtle undercurrent moving through you, almost like a quiet signal passing through your system, stirring emotions that did not come with clear explanations. And if you're honest, there was a moment where you paused without knowing why, as if something inside you was asking for your attention, not loudly, not urgently, but with a kind of certainty that could not be ignored. And if you have been feeling this pull, this quiet unraveling that does not look dramatic on the outside, but feels undeniable within you, then this is not random. This is not coincidence. This is alignment, finding you at the exact moment your awareness is ready to meet it. And what makes this even more significant is that today is not just another passing point in time. It is a doorway, a living moment where your internal structure begins to reorganize itself in ways you cannot fully see. Yet you may have noticed it the moment you woke up. Maybe there was a heaviness that did not feel like exhaustion, or a calmness that did not feel familiar, something slightly off from your usual emotional baseline. And throughout the day, there may have been waves rising within you without a clear cause. A sudden urge to pull back from people or situations you once felt deeply drawn to. And your mind may have tried to interpret this as confusion or even regression. But what you are actually standing inside is initiation, because there is a question emerging within you now that is fundamentally different from the one you have been living by. It is no longer about how to get love. It is about whether you are truly available to receive it. And that shift changes everything, because for so long your energy was organized around desire. You believed that wanting something strongly enough would eventually pull it into your reality. You visualized it. You held on to it. You built an emotional connection to the idea of it. And you convinced yourself that intensity of wanting was the pathway forward. But what is being revealed to you now is something deeper, something that may initially feel uncomfortable because it challenges the foundation you have been operating from. Desire that is rooted in lack does not magnetize it, distorts. It creates a subtle signal within you that continuously reinforces the idea that what you want exists outside of you, separate from you, unavailable to you in the present moment. And the universe does not respond to the words you speak or the images you imagine. It responds to the state you embody. It reflects your internal frequency back to you. And this is where the real shift is happening. There is a quiet dismantling occurring within you, a breakdown of the belief that love is something you must chase, earn, or finally reach, and in its place, a new realization begins to surface. One that changes the way you relate to everything. You cannot move towards something you are not yet open to receiving. And as this understanding begins to settle into your awareness, something within you starts to loosen. Almost like a grip you did not realize you were holding begins to release. And what makes this process disorienting is that it does not arrive with a clear explanation. It does not announce itself in a way your mind can immediately categorize it. Enters quietly, showing up as discomfort that feels vague but persistent, a restlessness that you cannot fully define, a sense that something no longer fits the way it used to. Conversations that once felt energizing now feel draining, as if your soul is no longer willing to participate in the same patterns. Attachments that once felt necessary now feel heavy, like carrying something that no longer belongs to you. And the most confusing part is that you cannot fully explain why this is happening. Because the change is not happening at the level of your thoughts, it is happening within your energy. You are shifting from a state of seeking into a state of becoming. And that transition naturally creates a temporary sense of disorientation. Everything that was built on misalignment begins to feel unstable, unfamiliar, and at times uncomfortable, and you may interpret this as loss. You may feel disconnected from what once felt certain. But what is actually taking place is not the loss of love. It is the dissolution of the illusion that love required you to search endlessly outside yourself. And this is where the deeper layer begins to unfold, because there were versions of your life that you once believed were inevitable timelines, that felt destined, where certain people remained, certain relationships unfolded. Certain outcomes aligned exactly the way you imagined. You invested your energy into these possibilities. You trusted them. You built emotional meaning around them. And now you are witnessing something unexpected. Those timelines are beginning to collapse. Not in a chaotic or cruel way, but in a precise and intentional one. And this is the part where many people resist, because it feels like something is being taken away. But what is actually happening is a refinement, a correction that is aligning you with something more accurate to who you are becoming. And this is not punishment. It is precision, guiding you toward a reality that matches your evolved state. Even if it means releasing the versions of your life that once felt certain, so that something more aligned can finally begin to take shape in what comes next. What is unfolding right now is not something being taken from you. It is something actively shielding you, even if it does not feel that way at first, because the paths that are quietly closing were never built for who you are becoming. They were designed around a version of you that believed love required effort, persistence proving, and enduring more than you should have ever had to tolerate. And that version of you is no longer the one guiding your decisions. You are stepping into a different, energetic state where love is no longer something you earn through giving more of yourself away. It becomes a reflection of how aligned you are within yourself. And that is why the changes you are noticing in your connections feel so confusing. Certain people may feel distant without explanation. Certain bonds that once felt unbreakable now feel uncertain. And there is a part of you that wants to understand why something that once felt stable is now shifting, and that uncertainty can feel deeply unsettling because your mind is searching for a clear reason. But what is actually happening is far more precise than your thoughts can immediately process. Nothing that is truly meant for you is being removed. What is occurring is a clearing. A quiet but necessary release of everything that cannot exist in the reality you are now entering. It is not your life falling apart. It is parts of your life falling away, so that something more accurate to your current frequency can take shape. And there is a truth emerging within this process that has the power to change everything once you fully allow yourself to see it. You can want love with every part of your being and still not be in a state where you can receive it, because wanting and being available are not the same thing. Wanting directs your energy outward. It places your focus on something beyond you, something you believe will complete you or finally bring you fulfillment. It carries an underlying sense of reaching, searching, trying to close a gap that feels present. But availability exists entirely within you. It is a grounded awareness that you are already whole enough to receive what is aligned with you, and when that internal state is not fully established, your energy begins to attract reflections of that misalignment without you even realizing it. You may notice patterns where you are drawn to people who are inconsistent connections that feel intense but lack stability. Dynamics that leave you questioning where you stand and what it all means. And this can create the illusion that something is wrong with you, but that is not the truth. What is actually happening is that your energy is still learning what true openness feels like. Openness without fear, without scarcity, without the need to control or predict outcomes in order to feel safe. And right now that learning is accelerating. You are being guided into a deeper understanding of what it means to be open in a way that is rooted in truth rather than desire alone. And you can feel that something is shifting inside you even if you cannot fully explain it yet. Your thoughts are beginning to change. Your emotional responses are no longer the same. There is a quiet strength emerging that was not as accessible to you before. And with that strength comes a new level of awareness. You are starting to recognize that you are no longer willing to tolerate uncertainty, inconsistency, or anything that causes you to question your value. And this is not your ego becoming defensive. This is alignment taking hold within you, because as you move out of a state of seeking and into a state of alignment, your standards do not simply rise. They transform at their core. You stop looking outward for validation because you begin to recognize a sense of resonance within yourself. You no longer feel the need to chase attention because you start to honor connections that feel mutual and grounded, and perhaps most importantly, you begin to release what feels unstable even when letting go is difficult. Because there is a deeper knowing within you that holding on would cost you more than walking away ever could. And this entire process is a recalibration of your emotional and energetic system. It is preparing you not just to encounter love, but to sustain it in a way that feels secure, balanced, and real. And one of the most misunderstood aspects of alignment is that it is often imagined as something peaceful and effortless, something that arrives with clarity and ease. But the truth is that alignment can feel like loss before it feels like peace, because becoming truly available for the kind of love you desire requires you to release everything that cannot exist within that level of truth. It asks you to let go of patterns that once felt familiar, attachments that once felt necessary, even parts of your identity that were built around accepting less than what you deserved, and this can feel like grief. You may find yourself missing people who were never fully aligned with you, revisiting memories, questioning decisions that were actually essential for your growth. And there may be moments where doubt surfaces, where you wonder if this path will lead you somewhere better or leave you feeling empty. But this discomfort is not a signal that you are moving in the wrong direction. It is evidence that you are shedding layers that no longer support who you are becoming. And as this process continues, you will begin to see more clearly what this shift is truly making space for in what comes next. What you may not fully realize yet is that even in the uncertainty you are standing inside, you are actively creating space for something that will never require you to diminish who you are. Something that will not ask you to chase for reassurance or constantly question your worth. And although this process can feel unclear and at times unsettling, it is the quiet and often invisible work of becoming truly available for a form of love that meets you fully rather than conditionally. And then almost without warning, the energy shifts again. But this time it carries a completely different quality. It is no longer heavy or confusing. Instead, it feels grounded, steady, almost peaceful in a way that does not demand your attention but gently holds it. And within this subtle shift, there is a moment where you begin to see yourself with a clarity that was not accessible before. The internal noise that once drove your longing softens just enough for a deeper truth to rise to the surface, and you start to notice that your reactions are no longer the same. The instinct to chase after what pulls away does not carry the same urgency. Situations that once would have unsettled you now move through you without creating the same emotional turbulence. And this is where something fundamental begins to anchor within you. Your sense of wholeness is no longer tied to whether someone else chooses you. It becomes something internal, something stable, something that does not fluctuate based on external validation. And from that place, a quiet but undeniable knowing begins to form you. Start to understand at a deeper level that real love will never require you to abandon yourself in order to keep it. And what makes this realization so powerful is that it does not arrive as a dramatic breakthrough. It settles into you gently, almost like a truth you have always known, but are only now ready to fully accept. And within that stillness, you begin to recognize that alignment is not something you force into existence. It is not something you chase or strategize your way toward. It is something you embody, something you become through the way you hold yourself, the way you honor your own energy. And once that embodiment begins to stabilize, everything that is meant for you starts to recognize you without effort, Because you are no longer broadcasting from a place of lack or searching, you are existing in a state that naturally attracts what resonates with it. And there comes a point in this process where detachment no longer feels like something you are trying to practice. It becomes something that happens organically, almost effortlessly. You begin to notice that the emotional intensity you once carried towards certain people, certain outcomes, certain expectations, begins to dissolve without you having to force it. It is not that you stop caring entirely, but the grip loosens. The urgency that once drove your actions fades into a quiet acceptance, and this can feel unfamiliar at first because you are used to equating intensity with meaning. But what you are experiencing is not indifference. It is alignment taking root within you, because when you're aligned, you no longer need to chase clarity from others. Clarity emerges within you. You begin to feel a sense of peace, even in situations that remain undefined. Something that would have once felt intolerable now feels manageable, even neutral, and you no longer feel compelled to reach out impulsively to fix what feels unstable, to prove your worth, or to hold together something that cannot sustain itself. Instead, you allow situations to reveal their true nature over time, and within that space, something powerful begins to unfold. You start to see each connection as it truly is, not through the lens of your desire or your hopes, but through the lens of your awareness, and that awareness becomes a form of protection, a source of guidance, a quiet but unwavering power that shapes your decisions without force. And when you look back, you may begin to recognize how your energy once moved almost entirely outward, constantly extending itself toward what you wanted, what you hoped would remain. What you feared might disappear if you did not hold on tightly enough. It moved through you like a current that never fully rested, always reaching, always trying to bridge the distance between where you were and where you believed love existed. You gave your attention freely, your time without much consideration, your emotional presence without fully realizing how much of yourself you were investing into spaces that were not meeting you with the same level of truth you tried to understand, to adapt, to remain open even when there was a quiet voice within you, signaling that something was not balanced. And over time, this pattern became so familiar that you accepted it as normal. You believed that this was simply what connection required. But now something is shifting beneath the surface of your awareness, at a level deeper than thought or conscious intention. Your energy is no longer extending itself in the same way. It is beginning to return to you slowly. At first, almost imperceptibly, like a tide that has turned and is moving back toward its origin. And you begin to notice small but significant changes in your behavior. Moments where you pause instead of reacting immediately. Moments where you observe instead of giving automatically, and within those pauses, a new awareness begins to take shape. You start to recognize the value of your presence, the weight of your attention, the quiet influence of where you choose to direct your energy, and with that recognition comes a shift that may feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable at times. Because you are no longer operating from the patterns that once defined you, and as this new way of being continues to stabilize, you'll begin to understand more clearly what this transformation is truly preparing you for in what comes next. What begins to take shape within you now is a completely different way of holding your energy, not from a place of defense or emotional shutdown, but from a place of awareness and intention that feels steady and self-directed. You start to notice that you are no longer offering yourself automatically to every connection or every possibility that appears in front of you. Instead, there is space where there used to be urgency. There is patience where there used to be immediate response. And within that space, something powerful is unfolding, because you are allowing things to come toward you rather than constantly extending yourself outward in search of clarity or direction. And this does not mean you stop caring or become distant in a way that disconnects you from others. It means you become rooted within yourself. You begin to exist from a place of presence rather than projection. And this shift can feel unfamiliar at times, because there are still parts of you that remember the old patterns, the instinct to reach, to check, to try to stabilize something that feels uncertain. And there may be moments where that impulse rises again almost automatically, asking you to return to what once felt normal, but each time you choose to remain grounded instead. Each time you allow the moment to unfold without forcing it, you are strengthening this new way of being. You are teaching your system that stability does not come from controlling outcomes, it comes from anchoring within yourself. And as this understanding deepens, you begin to see that holding your energy is not about withholding love or becoming unavailable. It is about honoring the value of what you carry. It is about recognizing that your energy is not something to be spent in exchange for validation or reassurance, but something to be fully embodied, regardless of how others respond. And as you continue to hold your energy in this conscious way, something remarkable begins to shift in how you are experienced by the world around you. Your presence changes. It becomes more grounded, more centered, more quietly magnetic in a way that does not seek attention yet, naturally draws it, because you are no longer trying to pull something toward you. You are no longer operating from the belief that it is your responsibility to initiate, sustain, or repair every connection. Instead, you become someone who allows alignment to reveal itself over time. Someone who understands that what is truly meant for you will not require constant pursuit. It will meet you within the space you have created by standing fully within your own energy. And as this stabilization continues, your perception begins to shift in ways that feel subtle at first, but quickly become undeniable. It is as if a layer has been lifted from your awareness, allowing you to see more clearly, to feel more accurately, to understand without needing excessive explanation, and situations that once felt confusing begin to make sense. Not because anything external has changed, but because your relationship to those situations has transformed. You are no longer interpreting everything through the lens of hope or desire. You are experiencing it through the lens of truth. And through that lens, you begin to notice patterns that you once overlooked. You recognize the difference between interactions that leave you feeling energized and those that quietly drain you. You see the distinction between someone who shows up consistently and someone who appears only when it suits them. And what changes most is that you no longer feel the need to reinterpret inconsistency into something meaningful. You no longer justify behavior that does not align with what you know you deserve. Instead, you see it as it is, without distortion, without illusion. And this clarity does not come from overthinking or analyzing every detail. In fact, it emerges when you stop doing that. It comes from reconnecting with your intuition, with that quiet internal voice that has always held the truth, but was often overshadowed by doubt or fear. And now that voice is becoming stronger, steadier, more present in your awareness. You feel it not just in your thoughts, but in your body, in your energy, in the subtle shifts of your emotional responses. And you begin to trust those signals, even when they challenge what you once hoped would be true. And there is a moment within this process where you recognize that you no longer need external validation to confirm what you already feel. You no longer depend on someone else to explain their intentions or define the connection for you to understand where you stand, because the truth reveals itself through experience, through consistency, through the way something feels over time. And instead of questioning that truth, you begin to accept it, even when that acceptance brings discomfort. Even when it asks you to let go of an idea you once held on to. There may be moments where this clarity feels like disappointment, where you are confronted with the reality of what something is, rather than what you hoped it could become. But within that experience, there is also a quiet strength forming, because seeing clearly gives you the ability to choose differently. It frees you from cycles of confusion, from the constant need to analyze or search for answers outside of yourself. And as this freedom expands within you, it begins to open the space for something entirely new to emerge in what comes next. There comes a moment in this process where something inside you clicks into place, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty that feels undeniable. And you begin to realize that emotional truth is not something you have to chase or extract from situations or people. It is something you allow to surface by no longer resisting what you already feel. And once you stop pushing against your own awareness, everything begins to simplify, not necessarily in a way that removes all challenge, but in a way that removes confusion. And in that clarity, you discover a new kind of power, one that allows you to move forward without hesitation, without second-guessing every step, without losing yourself in the process. And as this clarity deepens, you begin to recognize a pattern that has been present in your life for far longer than you may have consciously acknowledged. A cycle that has repeated itself through different phases and different circumstances, but has always carried the same underlying energy. It often began with intensity, with a connection that felt immediate and magnetic, something that pulled you in and created a sense of possibility that felt almost too real to question. But over time, that intensity would shift into uncertainty. Communication would become inconsistent, clarity would dissolve into confusion, and you would find yourself trying to understand what changed, what you did, what you needed to do to bring things back to what they once were. And for a long time, this cycle may have felt like destiny, like something you were meant to experience, something inevitable. But now, something within you is beginning to recognize it for what it truly is, a pattern rather than a fixed path. And that recognition is where everything begins to transform, because you start to notice the early signals, the subtle cues that once went unnoticed or were ignored in favor of hope, the moments where something feels slightly off, where your intuition quietly signals hesitation, even as your mind tries to move forward. And in the past, you may have overridden those signals, choosing to focus on potential rather than reality. But now you pause. You observe instead of immediately engaging, and that pause carries more power than you may initially realize, because it interrupts the automatic response that once pulled you into repeating the same experiences. It creates space for awareness, for conscious choice. And within that space, you begin to choose differently, not from fear or avoidance, but from alignment with who you are now. You no longer pursue something simply because it feels familiar or mirrors past experiences. Instead, you evaluate it based on how it resonates with your current state. And breaking this pattern does not always come with a dramatic moment of decision. Often it happens quietly, through small shifts in how you respond. Through subtle decisions, not to engage in what you know will lead you back into the same cycle, through choosing awareness over impulse. And there may still be moments where the old pattern tries to pull you back, where something feels familiar enough to tempt you into stepping into it again. But now you see it clearly, and that recognition changes everything, because once you are aware, you cannot unknow what you have seen. Once the pattern is visible, it no longer has the same control over you, and as you continue to choose alignment over familiarity, those cycles begin to lose their power entirely. What once felt inevitable becomes optional. What once felt like something you had to experience becomes something you consciously step away from. And in that shift, you reclaim something essential: your ability to create a different experience that is no longer defined by repetition, but by growth and awareness. And as this transformation continues, your sense of self-worth begins to evolve in a way that feels natural rather than forced. It is no longer something you try to convince yourself of through words or external validation. It becomes something you feel, something that exists as a steady state within you. You carry yourself differently, not in a way that seeks attention, but in a way that reflects quiet confidence. And you begin to understand that your value is not determined by who chooses you, who stays or who leaves. It is inherent and constant regardless of external circumstances. And this realization begins to influence how you interact with the world. You no longer tolerate behavior that diminishes your energy. You no longer accept inconsistency or unclear intentions, not because you are demanding perfection, but because you are aligned with clarity, and your self-worth becomes something that is communicated without words, a frequency that others can feel, whether they consciously understand it or not. Some will rise to meet it, while others naturally fall away. And for the first time, you find yourself at peace with both outcomes and within this space. A paradox begins to reveal itself. The less attached you become to specific outcomes, the more magnetic your energy becomes. This does not mean you stop desiring love or connection. It means your desire is no longer rooted in dependency. You are no longer holding on to a specific person or scenario as the only possible outcome. Instead, you open yourself to a wider field of possibility, to alignment in its highest form. And this shift sends a powerful signal, one that communicates that you are not seeking to fill a void, but to share a space of wholeness. And that energy is deeply attractive, not because it tries to be, but because it is authentic. Non-attachment allows you to remain open without becoming consumed to care, without losing yourself to experience connection, without fear of losing it. And in that space, you begin to understand that love does not need to be controlled in order to be real. It simply needs to be aligned. And as you continue to embody this alignment, you begin to notice changes in how others respond to you. The dynamics that once felt one-sided begin to disappear. You start to experience genuine reciprocity, where effort is matched and energy flows naturally in both directions. And while this may feel unfamiliar at first, it is a direct reflection of the state you are now embodying. You no longer carry the weight of the connection alone. There is ease, mutual understanding, shared presence, and although challenges may still exist, the foundation feels different. It is stable and real, and does not require you to abandon yourself in order to maintain it. And this is the beginning of experiencing love, not as something you fight for, but as something that flows naturally when you are aligned with yourself, and now you find yourself standing at a threshold, a point that marks a profound shift in your journey, where alignment is no longer just something you understand intellectually, but something you live through your choices, your responses, the way you hold space for yourself. You are no longer waiting to be chosen in order to feel complete. You have chosen yourself, and that choice has changed everything. You are open without being desperate, receptive without being dependent, grounded in who you are, while still allowing space for connection to enter your life. This is true availability, not readiness for a specific person, but readiness for a level of love that matches your growth. And as you stand in this space, there is a recognition within you of how significant this moment is. You have moved from wanting into being, from seeking into embodying. And in this quiet yet powerful state, your energy begins to communicate outward, silently reflecting who you are to everything and everyone around you, even if you do not consciously notice it at first. Others do. And this is where the next phase of your experience begins to unfold. What begins to unfold now is something you may not have expected, not because it is dramatic or overwhelming, but because it is so subtle that you might almost overlook it if you were not paying attention. There is a shift in the way you are perceived, in the way people respond to your presence, in how attention seems to find you without effort. And what makes this significant is that it is not rooted in seeking validation or trying to be noticed. It is the result of energetic coherence. For the first time, what you feel within yourself and what you express outwardly are no longer in conflict. There is no longer a mixture of desire and fear, openness and resistance. Instead, your energy becomes steady, clear and unmistakable. And without needing to say anything, it communicates something powerful, that you are grounded, that you are whole, that you are no longer searching for something to complete you, and that clarity begins to act like a signal, naturally drawing in what aligns with it while gently pushing away what does not. And you begin to realize that you are no longer experiencing your reality through confusion, you are shaping it through presence. And in that realization, you come to understand that alignment is not passive. It is an active state of being, a frequency that organizes your external experiences in ways that once seemed impossible. And as this frequency stabilizes within you, something else begins to change. Connections that were once rooted in fear begin to lose their influence over you. These were the connections that thrived on uncertainty, on emotional intensity, that fluctuated between highs and lows, on the constant need for reassurance. And at one time, they may have felt meaningful because of how deeply they affected you. But now, your perception has shifted. You begin to recognize the underlying imbalance, the tension that was always present beneath the surface, and instead of being drawn into it, you feel a natural distance forming not from rejection or avoidance, but from evolution. Because you are no longer available for dynamics that depend on inconsistency or anxiety to sustain themselves, your energy no longer resonates with confusion presented as passion. And as these connections begin to dissolve, there may be a moment where you feel an emptiness, a quiet space where something once existed. But that space is not loss. It is openness. It is the clearing of what cannot move forward with you into the reality you are now creating. And within that openness, something new begins to emerge. And when aligned energy starts to enter your life, it may not feel the way you once expected. It does not arrive with chaos or overwhelming intensity. It does not pull you into uncertainty or leave you questioning your place within it. Instead, it feels calm, grounded, steady in a way that may initially feel unfamiliar. There is a natural ease in the interaction, a flow that does not require effort or constant analysis. You feel understood without needing to explain every part of yourself, seen without needing to prove your value. And this type of connection does not activate your fear. It calms it. It does not create emotional turbulence. It establishes stability, and because you have spent so much time navigating the opposite experience, this may take time to fully trust. But as you remain present within it, you begin to recognize its authenticity. This is what alignment feels like when it takes form externally. It reflects the work you have done within yourself, the balance you have cultivated. And for the first time, love does not feel like something you have to figure out. It becomes something you can simply experience. And this is where another layer of transformation reveals itself. Receiving begins to replace desiring. And while desiring may have once felt natural, receiving requires a different level of openness. It asks for vulnerability, for a willingness to allow something real to enter your life without trying to control it. And in the past, you may have unconsciously created distance at this stage, questioning what was forming or preparing for its potential loss. But now something has changed. You are no longer resisting what you once asked for. You are no longer questioning whether you deserve it or whether it will last. Instead, you allow it. You remain present within the experience without projecting fear onto it. And this is the embodiment of alignment. The ability to receive without shrinking, without overanalyzing, without anticipating loss. You trust, not because you have certainty about the future, but because you are anchored within yourself, and that trust transforms the entire experience. It allows connection to deepen naturally, without force or fear, without the need to constantly define or secure it, and you begin to realize that you are no longer standing at the edge of love, you are within it. And what you are stepping into now is not just a change in circumstances, but a transition into an entirely new timeline, one that reflects who you have become rather than who you once were. This timeline is not built on longing or uncertainty. It is built on clarity, on self-awareness, on alignment that has been developed through every experience you have moved through. And you may begin to notice subtle confirmations along the way, moments that feel perfectly timed, interactions that carry a sense of purpose. small synchronicities that reinforce your direction, and these are not coincidences. They are reflections of your internal state, aligning with your external reality. And as this timeline becomes more defined, you begin to feel a sense of belonging within your own life. You are no longer chasing a future that feels distant. You are living within it, and that realization carries a quiet but undeniable power, grounding you in the present while opening you to what is still unfolding. And at the deepest level of this transformation, there is a realization that changes everything. You are not separate from the love you have been seeking. You are the source of it. Not in a way that removes connection with others, but in a way that redefines it entirely. Love is no longer something you depend on or search for. It becomes something that flows through you, something that exists within you, regardless of external conditions. And this realization brings a profound sense of freedom. You are no longer bound by the need for someone else to complete your experience. You are no longer defined by who stays or who leaves. Instead, you move through life with a sense of wholeness that remains constant, and from that place, connection transforms. It is no longer about filling a void, but about sharing an already full experience. It becomes resonance rather than need. And this shift influences every relationship you encounter moving forward. And as everything you have moved through begins to integrate into a single understanding, you start to see how each phase was necessary, how every moment of confusion, longing, detachment, and transformation guided you toward this clarity. There is no longer resistance to what has happened, no lingering attachment to what could have been. Instead, there is acceptance that is active and aware, a recognition that everything unfolded in alignment with your growth, and you feel more present within yourself, more connected to your own energy, more aware of the choices you make and the direction you are moving in. And this integration becomes the foundation from which you move forward with intention and quiet confidence, no longer needing to prove anything to anyone, simply existing as you are and as you stand. Within this moment, something becomes undeniably clear. This shift you felt, this unraveling, this transformation was never random. It was always guiding you here to a point where you no longer seek love from a place of absence, but embody it as a state of being. You have moved from wanting into alignment, from searching into becoming. You have released what could not meet you and opened yourself to what can. And in doing so, you have stepped into a version of yourself that no longer waits to be chosen, but naturally attracts what is meant for you. And this is where everything begins to change in what comes next.